Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Ingersoll, and I'm the Programs Director at SMU DataArts. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We had over 280 people register for this webinar, and we're very excited to share our research with you all today. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we come together today on a virtual platform from different locations, we can and should acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. Please join me in a moment of reflection and acknowledgement. Thank you. So during today's presentation, we invite you to use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask questions about the content. We will have time to get to your questions at the end, so feel free to add them as we go through, and then we'll pose them to our panelists at the end of the presentation. We also have the chat feature, which will allow you to reach our team to help troubleshoot any technology issues you may experience. So please feel free to use that for any assistance you might need throughout the webinar. We do have live closed captioning available for today's webinar. Thank you to Corvin Dosty for providing our captions today. You can activate those captions by clicking on the CC icon and choosing live transcript. And to address the most common question we get, we are recording today's webinar, and we will provide the link later for you to review and share with your colleagues. So joining us today are Dr. Glenn Voss and Dr. Kartik Kannan, both researchers and professors at Southern Methodist University. Glenn Voss is Research Director for SMU DataArts and Professor Emeritus from the Cox School of Business. His research, focusing on innovation and organizational learning, customer satisfaction and relationship management, and retail pricing strategies, has appeared in leading academic journals in marketing and management. Kartik Kannan is a professor of information technology and operations management at Cox School of Business and the Donna Wilhelm Research Fellow at SMU DataArts. He studies how technological innovations are changing how people access the internet, consume digital entertainment, and participate in e-commerce platforms. He also studies how retailers and arts institutions can leverage mobile location data to improve their service operations. So before we turn to Kartik and Glenn to discuss this recent research, I want to share a bit about our mission at SMU DataArts and some of our current projects. Our mission is to provide organizations and individuals with the evidence-based insights they need to build strong, vibrant, and equitable arts communities. As you'll see through this project, within our community at SMU, we work across several schools and disciplines to bring cutting-edge research techniques to the field of arts research. Our goal is to fuel the arts sector with essential insights and contribute to the growing research agenda at SMU. The work we'll be discussing today follows a trajectory of recent white papers and academic research published since the COVID-19 pandemic took shape in 2020, including work that examines reopening strategies for arts organizations, the extent to which an organization's audience reflects the diversity of its communities, and the demographics of the arts workforce, including perceptions of workplace safety and well-being. Today, we'll be discussing an ongoing project to use data to predict demand for in-person ticketing. We hope this work will provide another useful tool as recovery continues. The development of this model took well over a year to complete, and Glenn and Kartik are still accepting new data and refining it. I do want to thank our data partner, TRG Arts, who supply the aggregated ticket data used in the model. Over the last few months, we have published a series of blog posts that shared findings as new data was periodically added to the model. I know our team is going to put links to the most recent 2 blog posts in the chat. And pictured here is our most recently published post. The results you'll see today reflect the most recent data added to the model, as well as some takeaways that will be shared and further developed in a forthcoming blog post. So we're fortunate to have Glenn and Kartik here today to talk with us about this research. So Glenn, I'm going to start with you. Glenn, can you give us a sense of some of the takeaways that you have from this work? I think you're muted, Glenn.
Thank you, Katie. Sure, let's look at what some of the most recent takeaways are. One takeaway is we have an enduring shift in ticket demand attributable to what we'll call the COVID mindset. And we estimate that this is around a 20 to 25% decrease from the pre-COVID days. You can see that sales basically went to zero with the onset of COVID. And we have ongoing fluctuating COVID case rates that are also exerting a strong effect on ticket demand. And the third thing that is just now emerging is that vaccinations and boosters, which originally were viewed as the savior for performing arts, are no longer playing that role. That is, people are no longer viewing being vaccinated as their ticket to the performance. And then finally, price and performance levers still influence demand, but within a limited range.
Great, thank you, Glenn. Thank you for walking us through some of those main takeaways. And Kartik, I'm going to turn to you now. I know you were really involved in the development of this model and have led the charge. And so as we look at the dynamics that, that Glenn is talking about, it's apparent that we need new metrics to help us understand ticket sales. So can you talk a little bit about what metrics were used in the development of the model?
Sure. So traditional demand estimation has been done using factors like demographics, socioeconomic status, then the distance between the households and the organization in focus, as well as the organizational variables, like what is the price that they're charging, how many performances that they're offering. But things have changed. After COVID, the overall economic activity levels have gone down. What this means is people are not getting out of their house that often. So we need to measure and get a sense of economic activity among the households. Also, we need to keep track of the COVID-related measures like cases and vaccination rates. So we had added these new metrics so that we can estimate the demand better in the post-COVID world.
Great, thank you. Interesting. And so can you talk a little bit about how all this data was brought together to create the model?
Sure. Let's take the example of the Houston market. We have shown a household census tract on the left that is green in color with a house. And on the right, we have a purple color that's the census tract representing the organization in focus. So we are trying to understand the interaction between this household census tract and the organization in question. So for doing this, we curate a number of data sets. First, for the household census tract, in order to get a sense of how many people live there, we look at the total number of households, what is the median household income, then how many people are educated in terms of the percentage graduation rates, as well as the age demographics. Then we move on to the organization in focus. For that organization, we look at the number of ticket sales per month and how much are they charging on average, and how many performance are they offering, and then how big is the organization that we measure in terms of the budget size. But in order to understand the location characteristics of the organization, we also look at the competitors in and around the focal organization, how many competing organizations are there, and what are the other complements, meaning when people visit art centers, they visit restaurants and hotels nearby. So we capture that area also. Then we get onto the interaction between the household census tract and the organization. So this is key here. We first measure the distance between the two. The further a household census tract is away from an organization, then the less the propensity to buy tickets from that census tract. However, we also measure the mobile visitor flow from the household to the organization. So if there is a pre-existing commuter pattern where from the census tract of the household, people visit a lot to the organization census tract, then that means they're more likely to get tickets. On top of this, we add COVID level measures like the case rates, the vaccination rates, and we also control for the state level employment trends. So we bring all these things together in a data set.
Great, thank you. It's interesting to see how those, the traditional metrics you mentioned and the new metrics, you guys are bringing all of that together in this model. And as you've looked at this data over the course of the pandemic, what trends have emerged?
Sure. So now that we have all the data in hand, we are trying to understand the common trends by looking at the normalized counts over time. So we have monthly data set. So we track from January 2019 till December 2021. This chart shows the count of the tickets. So we see that there are three phases in this ticket patterns. In the pre-COVID era, there were robust sales of tickets. We see that it kind of peaked, and there are some patterns in the pre-COVID era itself. Then after COVID hit, the ticket sales dramatically shot down. It was staying near close to zero for about a year. And as vaccinations start rolling out and more people are getting vaccinated, we see that the ticket sales have picked up, but it's still not at the level of 2019. We are about 60% of the 2019 levels. And we do notice that this increase in ticket trends is correlated with, go to the next slide, with the case rates. As the cases go up, we can see this yellow color chart, that is the case rate. In 2020, as the case rates went up, the ticket sales were way down. Then we saw that the cases were going down, and that helped pick up the demand for tickets. But unfortunately, we had the Delta wave that again increased the case rate, that pushed the tickets down again. We see a similar pattern in the latest Omicron case trends. As the cases go up, the ticket sales are going down. Also, we notice that the next slide, that as people are getting vaccinated more and more, it is driving up the ticket sales. So there is a positive correlation between the vaccination rate and the ticket sales. And next slide, we will see that there is also a positive correlation between the overall traffic flow, the mobile traffic flow that we talked about earlier, from the household census tract to the organization census tract. We still notice that the traffic patterns have not reached the 2019 levels. We are still about 60% of the 2019 levels, and that is trending similar to the ticket sales. So one might expect that as the overall economic activity as measured by the traffic flows increases, we might see an upward tick in the ticket demand. We also collect a lot more data. In the next slide, we can show, we collect the number of performances and the prices set by the organizations, as well as the state level employment trends. Now, at this point, we notice that there's lots of graphs moving around. It's difficult to understand. So we add all these things to our model and then figure out what the model has to say about the ticket demand.
Great, thank you, Kartik. So thank you for walking us through how those data sets come together and all the different types of metrics we see in this model. With that, I'm going to turn back to you, Glenn, and just ask you what you're learning about ticketing demand from the models over time.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, you can see that all of this data has been aggregated over time, so 48 months, over 100 organizations, and over 100,000 organization household census tracts. And when we put that into the model and we run some analyses, we get these relationships. And in November, we offered a first set of results that showed strong positive effects for vaccinations, this green curve. This just indicates that as vaccination rates were going up, ticket sales were going up. And modest effects for price discounts, which is the blue, and performances, which is the red. And then the next one, in December, we updated those results. And here we're seeing vaccination rates, the effect of vaccination rates flattening out. That is, it's still positive, and especially at lower levels of vaccination rates, it's still positive. But we can see that the slope of the curve is decreasing as we go forward. And these give us some insight into the changing mentality, perhaps, of our ticket buyers. So the latest set of results now, we move forward. Well, first, let's talk about the evolution of this. Back in May of 21, the CDC said vaccination rates basically is your ticket out of this. And they're saying that you can get back to your life as normal after you've been vaccinated. And so when we did the analysis in June, we had this strongly positive relationship between vaccination rates and ticket demand, because the public had been told, get vaccinated and you can go back to the theater. But that changed after that. As we moved into the fall, we saw COVID cases surging. Delta was nearly twice as contagious. protection against infection rates begin to decrease over time, a booster shot will be needed. And so suddenly the public is having these different messages from the CDC saying, wait a minute, don't go too fast. You can still catch COVID even if you are vaccinated. And so when we did the analysis in September, as you saw before, this curve is flattening out at higher levels of vaccination rates. It's still positive. And if we look between 10 and 50%, at those rates, the two curves are pretty similar. But then when we get above 50%, in the 50 to 80% range, we see this flattening out. And so then we have Omicron. And the Omicron cases are hitting the fully vaccinated, according to the CDC. And the breakthrough infections are expected. Now we have to go back to wearing a mask in indoor public places. So with that message, the public is now reacting even differently. And so with our latest set of results, we see this new purple curve where, again, between 0 and 50% vaccination rates, we see pretty much the same relationship between vaccination rates and demand. But after 50%, now as we're moving into December, we see not only flattening curve, but a decreasing relationship. That is a negative relationship between vaccination rates and ticket demand. And this indicates that the counties that have the highest vaccination rates, that is 80% vaccinated, have lower ticket demand than counties that have moderate vaccination rates, that in the 50 to 60 range. So where to from here? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that in January, COVID cases spiked to a 300% increase over December. And that suggests to us that ticket sales were probably dropping in January. We do not have that data yet. This is a scenario where we're predicting ticket sales based on different COVID case rates. And in this scenario, we're saying, okay, COVID case rates dropped to summer 2021 levels. And we see that we expect that ticket sales will increase to about 43 to 44% of the 4-year peak. But we're not sure if they're going to decrease at that rate. It's promising at the moment, but we've been fooled in the past. So what if they only drop to the fall 2021 levels? In that case, we expect that ticket sales are not going to rebound very strongly. They would stay down at the 37% level or so. Again, this is percent of 4-year maximum ticket sales, which occurred back in 2018 and 2019. So if we want to understand the evolving new normal, the first takeaway is that we have these enduring COVID-related behavioral patterns that have shifted ticket demand, we estimate between 20 and 25%. Half of that is due to abstainers who are not ready to return to performing arts venues, and about half is due to lower traffic rates, as Kartik pointed out, and participation rates among those who have returned. The second is that fluctuating COVID case rates continue to exert a strong effect on ticket demand, keeping arts organizations in a reactive posture for the foreseeable future. And again, hopefully we will see case rates go down to near zero and ticket sales come back. Vaccinations and boosters no longer play the savior role. Highly vaccinated counties today, with presumably older, more vulnerable populations, are purchasing fewer tickets in response to reported levels of breakthrough cases. But the arts leaders are able to influence demand with price and performance, but they have to understand that that might be within a limited range. That is, not everybody is ready to return to the performance halls yet.
Great, thank you, Glenn. So I appreciate you both walking us through that. I actually think we do want to talk a little bit about some of the next steps for this work, but I might pause and we have some really great questions in the Q&A. So I'll ask you guys to answer some of these. So I do have an attendee who said, did you just say that the field is still at approximately 60% of 2019 ticket sales? So Glenn, can you, or Kartik, can you clarify that statistic? And is that indeed what the numbers are showing us, that the organization's data represented here are at 60% of 2019 ticket sales currently?
60% of the maximum observed ticket sales. So all of our data are on the monthly level. So the maximum month, I think it was actually in 2018. So we have 4 years of data. It's January 2018. Kartik only showed from 2019 just for visual simplicity because it becomes really difficult. So we are currently in the 60% range of the maximum observed ticket sales.
Thank you.
And I would, excuse me just a second, I would say that that's probably more like 70 to 75% of the average over the pre-COVID range.
That's helpful. Thank you for that clarification. I have a question to clarify the geographic reach of the sampling. Are the results national or regional to a specific area? I think probably the ticket sales are what they're asking about.
Yeah, so it represents 100 organizations that are, nationally, I would say nationally representative, larger organizations, mostly over $1 million, up to $1 million per year, up to $300 million per year. But it represents, again, I'm going to say this number because it's quite significant. It represents 100,000 organization by census tract combinations. And so there are some close to 300,000 census tracts in the United States. And there are 100,000 census tracts in our data. Great. So call it a third. Great.
Thank you. And I do have a question. I think this one is for you, Kartik. Can you further explain the pertinence of the household tracts and the mobile data to ticket sales performance? Mark comments that he's boggled by that. I think it is very interesting. So can you explain a little bit more why that data is pertinent to ticket sales?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So traditionally, we have been measuring the distance between a household census tract to the organization to get the propensity of sales from the household census tract. But what we observe is some household tracts may be far away from an organization, but due to the pre-existing commute patterns, people from that census tract may be traveling frequently to the organizational area. It could be due to office or other reasons. Maybe they have friends near the organization. So even though the distance is further away, they have a higher propensity due to the frequenting of trips between the household and the organization's census tract. So that is one context. The second is this allows us to measure the level of economic activity. So after COVID, ticket rates almost went to zero. And we want to get a sense of have the patterns of commute between census tracts, the household census tracts and the organization gone back to the 2019 levels. So the closer they are to the 2019 levels, then the better will be closer to the 2019 normals.
Right, great. And so just to further dig into that, so it sounds like you have data that shows just how much people are moving around between the place where they live and the place where that performance venue is located. And that data comes from mobile phones. So that's the data that you're pulling on from the model. It's just about how likely is someone to go to that place, even if it's not for a performance.
So do you want to show the backup slides? So we had a couple of slides.
Yeah, actually, yeah, maybe we can do that at the end. Yeah, we have a couple. We can also send out, those slides, but there's just some slides that sort of show how to get into that. We do have a request, Glenn, to maybe return to this this graph and just sort of dig into this a little bit more here. I have someone ask, just kind of clarifying, if you were saying that ticket sales were higher in counties that had lower vaccination rates, I think people were really interested in that. And just to kind of explain a little bit more about what we see on this graph, if you will, because I think people were very interested.
So this is the relationship between vaccination rate and ticket demand, according to the model we estimated. And what it's showing is that, and I'm focusing on the December, the most recent results. And the reason I'm doing that is because in December, the average vaccination rate was just above 60%. But we have a range from 30% to almost 86%, I think is the max. So now we have a lot of observations that are in that 30 to 80% range. And it allows us to estimate what is the ticket demand in each of those different counties based on vaccination rate. And it is showing that the more highly vaccinated counties are purchasing fewer tickets than the moderately vaccinated counties, not than the lower vaccinated. The counties that have low vaccination rates continue to purchase few tickets. The counties with moderate vaccination rates purchase the highest number of tickets, and the counties with the highest vaccination rates are purchasing a moderate level of tickets.
Thank you.
And our interpretation is a couple of things. Almost by definition, the highest vaccinated counties are older counties. They have older populations because vaccinations were available to the older people first. And also, kids 0 to 5 still are not able to get vaccinated, and our vaccination rates are for the entire population, including children. And even teens and 5 to 12-year-olds have lower vaccination rates on average than the adult population. So the higher vaccinated counties tend to be older and tend to be more vulnerable and have shown less willingness as of late to purchase tickets.
Thank you. And I actually have a question about political leanings, and someone is curious if the kind of the role of the kind of the political nature of each county and whether they tend to skew more red or blue, and is that represented in the model? I know it sounds like age is maybe more the pressing factor that you've seen.
We could add it. We have that data, but we have not included it.
Great.
We could.
Thank you. And I have a similar question about vaccine mandates, and if you've seen any effects from the vaccine mandates in increasing ticket sales.
So employee vaccine mandate, I'm not sure what exactly.
I think probably they're talking about employers mandating vaccines is my guess.
So we don't have that, although not sure how we would get that.
Okay, well, something interesting to think about.
Yep.
Great, and so then this is really helpful. Thank you. And then I think we have a number of questions just digging into those numbers, and someone is asking about their budget. And I know that we may not be able to give them specific advice about their budget, but they asked to clarify, if I'm budgeting my 2022 and 2023 ticket sales, you're projecting those will be 70% of 2019 numbers. Does that seem like an accurate characteristic based on the data?
That would be my best guess. Expecting that COVID will still be playing a role. I mean, if COVID goes away, then hopefully that would change. But this shift that we're talking about of 20 to 25%, we think of that almost as a fixed effect. That is, the behavioral patterns have changed so much in the broader public that people have gotten out of the habit of going to the performing arts. And it's not clear what will change that, what will bring it back. But it is an enduring effect that we don't see dissipating in the immediate future.
Great, thank you. And then I do have a question about ticket prices. Have you seen ticket prices go up, possibly due to organizations' needs for more equipment or cleaners? And did that affect sales similarly to discounts?
Kartik, this was in, why don't you back up a few slides to Kartik's, and that,
yeah,
that was in there. So there was a peak in prices, right? Yeah, right here. There was a peak in prices in early 2021 that dissipated. So the blue line at the top, yeah, this blue line is the average price. And there were some very high average prices during COVID. I suspect that this was supporters of the organization. There were very few sales, and so we had very few sales with some high prices. Supporters of the organization were providing monetary support in the form of price, I suspect. And then we also saw a peak in April, May of 21 that has dissipated over time or come down a little bit.
Great. I have a question. I think this is probably not included in the model, but it might be interesting to think about for the future. Any data about the content of productions, that people are not seeing content that is compelling? Has that changed from pre-COVID? Someone has just heard that one factor of people not returning, and they've just been hearing from people that it might be content related.
So content is very difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
And we struggle with that question, and we don't have a good answer to that question. But we are in the process of looking at digital content and the impact that digital content is having on ticket demand and also the diversity of audiences.
Great. Yeah, and I do have a question about that, a question about maybe a more of a philosophical question of, is virtual participation a viable substitute? Does going to the performing arts necessarily mean less participation? So it sounds like you guys are also working on looking at that, the effects of digital participation.
Yes, we are definitely looking at that too. I think digital is going to be one of the offerings that the organizations have to give. People might choose between the two. We are trying to understand whether they're complements or substitutes. There are a lot of open questions, especially after the COVID. We might notice that the consumer behavior has changed. So these are things that we would love to study in the future.
Great. Okay. Well, we have, I'm going to actually take us through maybe the rest of our slides, just talk about next steps. And then if anyone has additional questions, we should have a few minutes at the end too. But thank you, Glenn and Kartik, for discussing this with us. So let me return. Excuse the slide jumping, everyone. Thank you. So as we think about next steps for this work, we just want to make sure everybody, does know that our researchers, Glenn and Kartik and the team, will continue to update the model based on new data and continue to share findings and analysis via our blog. And I will suggest, I know those links are in the chat and we'll send them in the follow-up note, but I think if you're really interested in digging into some of those data points and how they look alongside ticket prices, there's a lot of amazing graphics in those blog posts that you can take a look at. If you would like to keep up with future blog posts and other research that we put out, we will share some ways that you can subscribe at the end of today's session to just keep up with those as they come out. Additionally, our team is exploring web tools for specific markets, which use this model that we're discussing to help arts leaders understand ticketing demand in their location. And so we did want to share a quick demo of an early prototype of this tool. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So you should be seeing a prototype of this tool on your screen right now for Kansas City. And this tool builds upon our audience opportunity tool, which was piloted pre-COVID in the Dallas area. And this tool is meant to help arts leaders understand local demand. And so, what can they expect from their local communities in terms of their likelihood to purchase tickets to their organizations? And all of the modeling work that Kartik and Glenn are discussing has allowed us to to begin to update this tool to reflect the ongoing effects of COVID that Glenn has mentioned. So here, if we're looking at one area, this happens to be Kansas City, but this could be built for any city, which is further subdivided by a census tract. So you'll see on the map that each tract is shaded to represent the likelihood that residents within that tract would purchase a ticket to the specific size and discipline of organization that this map is currently looking at. And so the darker green the tract, the more likely someone is to purchase a ticket from that census tract for this organization. If you look on the left of the screen here, there are 3 different factors that users can explore in predicting demand. So you can change the ticket price, you could change the number of performances, and you could also change the COVID cases. So I'm going to change the COVID cases here, and it is subtle, but as I do that, you'll see the shading update to represent whatever kind of scenario you're inputting into the tool. In addition, on the right-hand side, I can click on any census tract. And then over here on the right, I'll see some data about that particular census tract. So I'll see the total population in that census tract, the propensity rate. Again, that's just, think about that as the likelihood that someone from that census tract would purchase a ticket. And then we do have predicted sales transactions. That's just driven by that propensity rate and the total population in that area, as well as some information about the demographic characteristics of that census tract here in the tool. So again, this is an initial prototype, but we are seeking opportunities to develop this tool in partnership with local communities, and we think it has exciting potential. So we wanted to share it with you today and just give you a glimpse of it. So with that, I'll go back to our slides. And we wanted to talk just a little bit about other projects that our research team and the great researchers we have with us today are working on, just so you have a sense of what is coming. So they are doing some work on continuing on this topic of post-COVID recovery. There is actually an academic paper available now about managing supply and demand for the performing arts in the time of COVID. If you're interested in that, you'll see the link on the screen, and we'll also put that link in the chat. As Glenn and Kartik already mentioned, they're doing some work on digital programming, exploring the question, does digital programming increase audience diversity? Also thinking about location analytics, thinking about how location analytics can improve DEI outcomes for art centers, and how location analytics can help in managing operations and marketing efforts. And lastly, looking at data-driven decision-making and how data-driven decision-making and analytics can improve operations of arts organizations. So stay tuned for more on these topics as this work develops. And as we go back to Q&A, if anyone has any final questions, before we do that, I do want to invite all of you on this webinar. Now that you've gotten this glimpse into the kind of data-driven work that our researchers are working on, what topics would you like to see the SMU DataArts research team explore in the future? So I would invite you to open up the chat and feel free if you have something that you really would like Glenn and Kartik and their colleagues to think about investigating, feel free to share your suggestions. We'd love to hear from you about that. So with that, I'm going to go back to our Q&A and see what other questions we can answer today. Okay. Okay, so I have a question about if you've requiring the audience to be vaccinated, this idea of vaccine requirements for attendees. Do you have any data on how that increases the audience likelihood to come to the theater? I'm not sure if that would be reflected in the model or not.
You're muted.
We do not currently have that data, but we can explore trying to incorporate that. Vaccine mandates are a little tricky because they vary across cities, within states, across counties, and then also across states. But I like that point. We'll look into that.
Great. So yeah, so thank you for any suggestions. Your questions can also help influence direction. Any information about, someone has a question about how far in advance people buy. They know that they've had customers concerns about getting refunds or shows being postponed. And so how is that handled in the model?
So all of our ticket demand is aggregated at the month level when the ticket was purchased. So that's why you saw positive ticket purchases even during the beginnings of COVID when everything was shut down. Some organizations continued to sell tickets for future events. I can't tell you off the top of my head just how far in advance they are buying or whether that pattern has changed over time, but that also is a question we can examine and we will.
Great. Thank you. And then another question that might be interesting to look into, or maybe you already have, were today's lower vaccinated counties purchasing more or fewer tickets prior to COVID? So.
I don't have the response to it. I'm thinking whether how I would model that. Kartik, any thoughts on that?
We have to look it up. It's a good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So,
well, we'll just note that for the future. It's a really interesting question. And it's also exciting to.
Is the lower vaccinated counties, are they different even before COVID?
Yeah.
Interesting question. Yeah, we have to look into it.
Great. Perhaps a similar question about if any of the 100 organizations are seasonal and what it might mean for a summer seasonal venue in terms of ticket sales and the model.
Seasonal in the purest sense, I don't believe that any of the organizations are seasonal in that sense. Most or many of the performing arts organizations might have 9-month seasons, but I don't think any of them are shorter seasons.
Great. And then I have a question. I think you did answer this, but maybe we can go back to, so for asking about spring sales, so for January through May, June of this year, have you seen what the trends are so far, and have you modeled for that period what might happen?
So we have modeled for January through June of 2022, and anytime you are predicting outside of the data or outside of a time range, it's fraught with challenges. But these are predictions for January 22 through June 22, based on different COVID rates. And so that's the only thing that we are varying there. We know that COVID spiked in January. We know it's coming down. We hope it's going to zero. And if it went to zero, then we could expect that sales would increase significantly.
Great, thank you. And I do have a question about the 60% of maximum on the monthly level based on sales. Okay, so I'm going to read this and we can see. So is that 60% of maximum based on sales during that month or total sales for events that took place that month?
Yeah, so again, our ticket purchases are when the ticket is purchased, not when the event takes place. So that's why you see, if you go back to the slides that Kartik presented, the maximum purchases generally tended to occur in March and April. And I interpret that as being season subscription sales for the following season.
Great. Thank you. And do the average ticket sales include subscription sales?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. I have a question about, okay, so do you think warmer climates will have higher ticket sales in comparison to colder climates, given the ability to have more outdoor programming?
Again, there's lots of interesting questions coming up here that we can look at. We have not controlled for region of the country, but it's something that we could look at.
Great. Okay, so, and I have a question, I think this one was in the chat, so I'm gonna ask it. So You mentioned the COVID mindset, Glenn, and there's a request to just talk a little bit more about what you mean by that for folks.
I think it's my own personal projection. I was vaccinated early and I was boosted early. I got boosted and went to New York in November. I went to 3, they were not sold out performances, but they were very well attended performances in New York. And since then, now with the Omicron, I find that personally, I have pulled back in terms of my willingness to go to the gym, my willingness to go to an arts venue. And so that's my personal COVID mindset. And the data suggests that I'm not the only one with that mindset.
Thank you. And I do have a question. Is there a plan to add customer sentiment analysis to this model? I'll pose that to you, though I'm not sure if that's in your plans.
It's an interesting question. First, we have to figure out how to measure the customer sentiment. We do have one plan of getting social media data from one of the large social media companies that might give us a sense of what people are chatting about the organization in focus. But it's something that we have to work on. If you have any good ideas on how to acquire this customer sentiment, then we can tackle that.
Interesting. Yeah. So something to think about. And I do have a question, which I'll go ahead and answer, which if all the metro areas are covered by that app that we're working on. And the answer is no right now. It's not been built out for all markets. But we are looking for, it takes a certain amount of effort to build it out for a specific market. It's not really something that can be replicated nationally really easily. So we are looking for partners to think about if we might be able to bring it to specific communities. So if you're interested, feel free to get in touch with us. And I think that is all of our questions. So with that, I'm going to make sure to share our contact information. And we do have a few minutes left, so if you have more questions, feel free to put them in here. But I want to make sure we leave you with this. We had a lot of really great questions. If you do want to pursue some of these specific lines of questions, keep sending your suggestions for research. You can get in touch with our research team at research@culturaldata.org. And if you are interested in bringing this model to your community of grantees or some organizations you're affiliated with, our development team would be happy to discuss that with you. They can be reached at businessdevelopment@culturaldata.org. And as I mentioned, we have several ways to just stay connected with us and keep getting updates on the type of research we're doing. So you can follow us on social media. Our handle is @SMU DataArts. And you can also subscribe to our free newsletter. So we have a bi-monthly general newsletter subscription and a reports and white paper subscription that will make sure you get information when we have new research that's been released. And we do have a link in the chat to subscribe to that. And so that brings us to the end of our presentation today. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to ask them. Great. Okay, one question from Drew. Oh yeah, so this is again asking for if you know the most common factors for that COVID mindset change. Is it general malaise, people getting out of the habit of leaving the house, income levels? Do we know what's causing that?
I don't know what's causing it, but we know that there are 2 factors that are highly predictive of ticket sales right now. And one is the COVID case rate. So it's a reaction to news about COVID cases and who's catching COVID and breakthrough COVID cases. And the other is the mobile traffic pattern data that Kartik talked about earlier. And we saw that that's something that has not come back. It's maybe at 80% of pre-COVID levels. And there is no evidence that that will come back in the foreseeable future. So I would say those two factors, we are getting out less in general, just getting out because we're not going into the office, among other things. And then we have concern about COVID cases.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for summarizing that. And I do know there are also efforts out there to do more audience surveying about, what people are thinking about in terms of when they make decisions. So I think this is nice data. That's a nice complement to that type of research. So that's really interesting. There's a lot of.
Katie, if you have a couple of minutes, I'd like to go over the backup slides. Just to
Okay.
give a glimpse of
Yes.
how mobile location tracking might help.
Great. One sec. Okay. Yeah. So we'll do this. Okay. So we had a question earlier about what is it about this? What is it about household data that is so helpful? And so Kartik has a few slides to just talk a little bit about that. So I'll turn it over to you, Kartik.
Sure. So this is a sample data that we got for one organization, the Houston Downtown Arts District. So this heat map tells us the flow of visitors from the census block groups surrounding the Houston area to that organization. So the block groups that are in dark color means there are more people from those block groups visiting the organization. This is just a regular commute pattern. Okay, this has nothing to do with sales. So this is the mobile location data that we're tracking. Next slide. This actually shows the transaction count, meaning the ticket transactions from the different census block group that are attributed to the sales in the focal organization. Now, we see that the heat maps are similar in the next slide. So on the left, we have a heat map of visitor counts from the nearby block groups to the organization. And on the right side, we have the transaction counts of tickets from these respective block groups to the organization. And visually, we can notice that these are similar, they're highly correlated. So this helps us track not by the distance between the census block group of the home and the organization, but by the flow of visitors based on the existing commuter patterns. So this is what goes in the model. And this also will allow us to measure the level of economic activity between the household census tract and the organization after COVID, and how this compares to before COVID. And what we are pointing out is that this traffic pattern has not reached to the 2019 levels. It's still at 60 to 70% of the 2019 levels. So the economic activities are as lower in general.
Great. Okay. And I'm sorry, I have someone in the chat who said their question wasn't posed, but David, if you could re-ask your question, we have a little bit of time left, and I apologize for missing it. And if anyone has, thank you, Kartik, for answering that. So if anyone has, we do have a few minutes. So if anyone has additional questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. Great. So there's a question to, okay, so here's a question about fully vaccinating folks are less willing to attend indoor public performances because there are ample number of fellow attendees who are fully or even partially vaccinated. Is that true? I'm gonna see if I can pose this. So fully vaccinated folks are less willing to attend indoor public performances because of the fact that there are ample numbers of fellow attendees who are fully or even partially vaccinated. Is that true?
I don't think we can answer that question. Yeah. The data just, we can only force the data to tell us so many things, and that one, it would be a difficult one.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I do think a lot of these specific questions too, we're happy to kind of correspond with people via email about those. But I know it's a lot of these are kind of about that customer sentiment piece. So interesting to think about how that might go along with some of the high level data we get here. And then I do have a question of when do we get to 100%, which I recognize that we can't answer that question. You guys cannot predict the future necessarily. But I will say that if you want to answer that or kind of respond to that, please feel free. But I will say that we will continue again to update the model. So, if you're interested to see what things are going to look like going forward, right now Glenn shared those predictions through the summer. But that work will continue. So this idea of kind of keeping people updated on what we're predicting as we go forward, we'll keep going. So I encourage you to follow along on the blog posts. And we may not be able to say exactly when we'll get to 100%, but our research team will be with everyone through this, trying to kind of continue looking forward. So with that, Glenn and Kartik, do you want to add anything about when we might get to 100%?
When COVID goes to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, the situation is constantly evolving. We don't know about the future. Let's say we have a new variant that's even more highly transmissible than Omicron. Then, people react to that, and that will change the dynamics. On the other hand, if there are no more variants, then it could be COVID will become endemic, and that might change the behavior in either way. So what is important for us as researchers is to keep track of this so that we can keep monitoring and offer timely, periodic insights.
Great, thank you. And then I do have a question about thinking about that heat map. Are folks, chicken or egg question, are folks more likely to purchase tickets from those mobile heat areas, or are those areas have high propensity because of what we are doing and what we're offering? And I think probably the answer to this is both, right? And that's why that tool right now allows you to make changes to how you might offer performances, and also shows you propensity. So it kind of, I think it's, it is a chicken or egg question, but it's really meant to help organizations see what the effects of different choices they might make, as well as things that we can't control, like COVID case rates, how that might change those scenarios. So that's a good question from Michael. And I do think we are at time now. So I do want to just thank everyone, and also just make sure you have that email address, research@culturaldata.org. I know people had some more in-depth questions they wanted to ask, and we are very open to those. If you want to get in touch with our research team and kind of dig into some of those data points. And I would also encourage everyone to take a look at those blog posts where the data is kind of laid out. And there is also an academic paper on this topic that we can share with you if you really want to dig into the research. So with that, I think we'll close today's webinar session. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Kartik, for sharing your expertise today. And I also just want to make sure we close by saying that we will send the slides and the recording out to everyone who is registered. So I've seen that question. So you will have access to this information if you'd like to review it later.
Thank you. Bye.
So much,
everyone.